In the story we all know, he's a corpse on a golden throne. A dead god demanding a sacrifice of 1,000 souls every single day, just to keep the darkness at bay. In our timeline, the 41st millennium is defined by his dying light. A flicker of hope in a galaxy absolutely determined to snuff it out. The Imperium of Man, in all its brutal, suffocating cruelty, is the Emperor's legacy. It's a monument to his ambition, his power, and his ultimate tragic failure. We curse this regime. We hate its fanaticism, its ignorance, and its endless, grinding wars that chew up entire generations. We look at the High Lords of Terra, the warring chapters of Space Marines, the numberless, faceless soldiers of the Imperial Guard, and we see a nightmare made real. A nightmare that has somehow kept humanity alive for 10,000 years. But that is not this story. What if the greatest protector humanity ever knew never existed? What if the wars that forged the Imperium never happened? What if the godlike Primarchs were never made, the legions never raised, and the Great Crusade never launched? To reclaim the stars? This is the story of that other timeline, a timeline where the Emperor of Mankind is just a myth. It's the story of a timeline where humanity isn't a star-spanning empire, but scattered, terrified prey. This isn't a tale of a quick, merciful end. It's a slow, agonizing death stretched across millennia. A death brought by enemies from outside, and by the fatal flaws buried deep within ourselves. This is the story of how our species dies. This is the timeline where humanity doesn't conquer the stars, it gets eaten by them. This is the timeline of doom. Our story, our break from the history we know, begins on Terra itself, near the end of the 29th millennium. In the main timeline, this was the dawn of the Unification Wars. It was the moment a warlord in golden armor, known only as the Emperor, finally stepped out of the shadows, leading his Thunder Warriors, genetically engineered protospace marines. He launched a 2,000-year war to conquer and unite the broken tribes of a shattered Earth. This wasn't the Terra we picture. It wasn't the gleaming hive world of the Imperium. And it certainly wasn't the cradle of civilization. It was a ruin. The age of strife, 5,000 years of anarchy and isolation, had turned humanity's home world into a patchwork of radioactive hellscapes, ruled by techno-barbarian warlords. And these weren't simple savages. They were masters of corrupted technology, twisted genecraft, and all too often, warp sorcery. In our timeline, the Emperor rose and crushed them all. He defeated the brilliant madman Rangdan Xenocides, tyrant of the Pan-Pacific Empire. He ended the reign of Calagan of Ursh, a terrifying warlord who commanded armies of psychers across the plains of old Asia. The Emperor's unification wars were brutal, but they had a point. Forge a united Terra from which he could save humanity from itself. But in this timeline, that warlord never shows up. There's no Emperor, no Thunder Warriors, no unification. There is only the rot. Without that unifying force, the techno-barbarian nations of Terra don't fall. They just fester. The wars don't end. They get worse. Rangdan Xenocides isn't executed. His Pan-Pacific Empire, with its legions of gene-forged monsters, just keeps fighting. In the heart of what was Eurasia, Calagan of Ursh isn't defeated by a righteous army. He's probably killed by a rival warlord who's even deeper into dark arts. His empire breaks apart, but his sorcery doesn't die. It spreads like a virus among the petty tyrants picking over his corpse. Imagine a world locked in total war, not for centuries, but for millennia. The skies, already choked with ancient fallout, grow darker as dirty nukes and forbidden bioplagues become standard tools of war. The great gene labs that the Emperor would have seized to create his angels of death are left to their own horrific work. They churn out legions of fat-grown monsters, not stable, disciplined soldiers, but twitching, screaming things, built only for slaughter. The very land becomes a weapon. Gene wars create hyper-aggressive, carnivorous plants that swallow whole armies. Nanoplagues from the dark age of technology are reawakened, turning continents into grey goo that consumes metal, stone, and flesh. The oceans, long since turned to toxic sludge, boil with geothermal weapons, kicking up global storms of acid rain. Humanity on Terra doesn't rise, it devolves. The knowledge of the past isn't reclaimed, it's burned away. Populations crash. On this dying world, there's no hope coming from the stars. There's only the daily struggle to survive in a world designed to kill you. Survivors become hunched, wretched things, scuttling through the ruins of hive cities that are now just vertical tombs. By the time the 30th millennium dawns, when the Great Crusade should have begun, Terra is no longer the cradle of humanity. It's its grave, a quarantined, radioactive wasteland whose last screams are never heard by the wider galaxy. There are no angels of death to bring enlightenment. On mankind's own homeworld, there's only the slow, quiet rot of extinction. And out in the galaxy, a far greater power, left completely unchecked, begins to stir. While Terra was busy tearing itself apart, the biggest threat in the galaxy wasn't humanity's self-destruction, it was the explosive growth of the Orks. In the main timeline, a truly organized Ork Empire was a threat that just kept coming back. The Great Crusade's single greatest achievement was the Ulanor Crusade, where the Emperor and his War Master, Horus, shattered the Ork Empire of Overlord Urlak Urg. The victory was so complete that the Imperium thought the green skin menace was broken forever. They were wrong. 1500 years later, an even bigger Ork Empire, led by the Beast, would rise from Ulnor's ashes and nearly destroy the Imperium. That, wow, was defeated, but at a catastrophic cost. In this timeline, there's no Ulanor Crusade. There's no Horus, no Imperial army, and no Space Marines to stand against the Green Tide. Urlak Urg isn't defeated. His empire isn't shattered. It's allowed to grow. The Orks of Ulanor back then weren't the disorganized mobs we often think of. They were the seeds of what would become the Beast's empire. Smarter, more organized, and better with technology. The psychic energy from a huge unified Ork population. The way makes them smarter, unlocking genetic knowledge. Without the Great Crusade to stop them, the Ulanor Empire doesn't collapse. It gets stronger. Urlak Urg, or a successor even more powerful, becomes the first true Ork Emperor. The Ulanor sector becomes the permanent, beating heart of a greenskin dominion that just keeps expanding. In our timeline, the Emperor knew that every delay meant millions more Orks. In this timeline, the Orks have all the time in the world. For the scattered human worlds that survived the Age of Strife, this is the beginning of the end. These worlds, some with advanced tech but no unified military, are just islands in a rising green sea. They fall, one by one, but they aren't just destroyed. This new Ork Empire is horrifyingly practical. Instead of just killing everyone, they enslave them. Human worlds become farms. People are penned like cattle, bred for food and for the brutal amusement of their masters. Their technology is looted, their factories repurposed, and their people become fuel for the ever-expanding why. By the 31st and 32nd millennia, the galaxy looks terrifyingly different. The Segmentum Solar, the bastion of imperial power in our history, is now the core of this green empire. There's no light of the Astronomican to guide human ships. There's only the roaring psychic gestalt of trillions of orcs. A beacon of pure violence that draws even more greenskins from across the galaxy. This isn't just a wake. It's a civilization, a brutal, crude, and unbelievably violent one. But a civilization nonetheless. They build attack moons not as a crowning achievement, but as a standard weapon for humanity. There is no hope of fighting back. The few pockets that are left are either slaves or live in constant terror, hiding on forgotten worlds, praying they aren't found. They are no longer as a galactic power. They are livestock, vermin. Their extinction is now a question of when, not if. The galaxy doesn't belong to man, it belongs to the orc. And yet, even as the green tide swallows the stars, a far more ancient and insidious horror begins to stir in the galactic north. A silence is spreading, and it consumes all. Telling a story on this scale, charting the slow death of a species over thousands of years, takes a lot of planning and the right set of tools. Just as the techno-barbarians of old Earth needed weapons to wage their wars, I need the right digital tools to build these narratives for you. That's why I use, and by using them, you're not just getting the best for yourself, you're directly supporting this channel. You allow us to keep exploring these dark and fascinating possibilities. So, thank you. And now, let's get back to the timeline of doom and the cosmic silence that was about to fall. In the official history of the Imperium, there are some wars you just don't talk about. Few are whispered about with more terror than the Rangdan Xenocides. These were wars fought during the Great Crusade that were so brutal, so costly, that most records about them are sealed or destroyed. This alien menace from the galactic north was so powerful, it handed the Space Marine Legions losses they wouldn't see again until the Horus Heresy itself. It took the combined might of multiple legions, led by Primarchs like Leon L. Johnson and Lemon Russ, just to stop the Rangdan threat at the cost of tens of thousands of Space Marine lives. In our new timeline, there's no Emperor. That means no Space Marine Legions, no Primarchs. When the Rangda wake up, there's nothing to stop them. We don't know exactly what the Rangda were, but what we do know is terrifying. They were masters of subversion, often using creatures called Slaugth murder minds. The Slaugth, or maggot men, are horrifying worm-like beings that can wear human skin and feed on death. The records are a mess, but the Rangda seem to be working with, or maybe for, these ancient carrion lords. Their way of war wasn't a simple frontal attack. It was insidious. It began with silence. In our timeline, the first sign of a Rangdan attack was a communications blackout as entire sectors just went quiet. In this timeline, the human colonies are already isolated. When the Rangda arrive, their silence is just an extension of the silence that's already there. The Xenocides begin, but without an Imperium to fight, it isn't a war. It's a harvest. The Rangda and their Slaughtmasters masters move from world to world, not to conquer, but to consume. They don't want territory. They want minds and bodies. Human populations are enslaved, not with crude chains like the orcs, but through terrifying psychic corruption. Worlds fall without a fight. Their people turned into puppets marching willingly into grotesque processing vats. The sloth, who could walk among humans in disguise, would find these fractured, desperate worlds laughably easy to infiltrate. The Ork Empire, for all its strength, is not ready for this kind of enemy. Orcs thrive on open, brutal war. They don't understand an enemy that corrupts from within, that turns their own psychic energy against them. The Green Empire's northern borders begin to rot away, not in glorious battle, but in a creeping, silent decay. Entire orc-held worlds just go dark. Between the 32nd and 40th millennia, the galactic north and east are scoured clean, not by fire, but by a chilling, methodical extermination. Billions, maybe trillions of human lives are snuffed out, without a single cry for help ever being heard. The vast Ork Empire is forced to give up huge chunks of territory, unable to fight an enemy it can't even understand. The galactic map changes again. Where there was a growing green stain, there is now a vast, unnerving patch of black. A void. Humanity, already reduced to cattle by the orcs, now faces a new, more horrifying predator. One that consumes not just their bodies, but their very minds. They are driven further into the shadows, their numbers dwindling to almost nothing. They are a species on the absolute brink. But their agony isn't over. Because as the galaxy is carved up between the brutal and the insidious, the greatest spiritual poison of all seeps into the cracks, completely unopposed. In the 41st millennium, there's no evil more absolute, more corrupting than the ruinous powers of Kaisos, the warp, the dimension that allows for faster than light travel, is their home, an ocean of raw psychic energy. And in that ocean swim entities of unimaginable power. Khorne, the god of slaughter, Tzeentch, the god of sorcery, Nurgle, the god of decay, and Slaanesh, the god of excess. In the main timeline, the Emperor understood this threat better than anyone. He himself was a psyker of impossible power, a living anathema to the gods of the warp. He created two critical shields to protect humanity. First, the Astronomican, a psychic lighthouse on Terra fueled by the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psykers and focused by the Emperor's own mind. It provides a beacon of order in a realm of pure chaos. The second shield was the Gellar field. This device wraps a bubble of real space around a ship in the warp, protecting it from the predators within. But even with these protections, warp travel is dangerous. A flicker in the Gellar field can be a death sentence. But in the timeline of doom, no Emperor means no Astronomican, no guiding light. The advanced tech for reliable Gellar fields a secret held by the Emperor's allies on Mars, is never shared. The crude warp drives used by the scattered human survivors are basically suicide machines. Every time a desperate human ship jumps, it's plunging blind into an ocean of sharks. Navigation is pure guesswork. The ships are lost, emerging thousands of light years off course, thousands of years in the future, or just not at all. And with failing Geller fields, every trip is an invitation for daemons to pour in and turn the ship into a screaming tomb of flesh and metal. Soon, interstellar travel for humanity just stops. The last human worlds are totally isolated, but chaos can't be contained so easily. Without the Emperor's secular creed to starve the gods of worship, humanity is spiritually defenseless. On worlds ravaged by orcs or stalked by the Rangda, people get desperate, and in their desperation, they pray. They pray for deliverance, for strength, for an end to their suffering. And the Chaos Gods answer. On a plague-ridden agri-world, farmers pray to Nurgle for an end to the sicknesses. He grants their wish, transforming them into his own bloated, joyful plague bearers. On a world locked in endless war, warriors scream for victory at any cost. Horn hears them and gives them unnatural fury, turning them into berserkers who slaughter for his throne of skulls. Worlds desperate for knowledge, to fight back, turn to siege. He grants them forbidden lore, but their ambition leads to madness and mutation, their souls becoming his playthings. And on worlds where the rich descend into hedonism, Slaanesh offers new sensations, pushing them to greater and greater depravity until their society collapses into a vortex of excess. Without the Inquisition to hunt them or Space Marines to purge them, chaos cults don't just survive, they become the dominant religions. Thousands of chaos-worshipping kingdoms rise across the galaxy. Humanity is no longer just prey for aliens. It has begun to actively feed its own soul to its destroyers. This is the spiritual extinction of our species. And as they squabble amongst themselves, they are completely unaware of the final, silent threat approaching from the void between galaxies. A threat that eats everything. The Tyranids, the great devourer, they are a swarm from outside our galaxy. A hive fleet of billions of organisms, all linked to a single, terrifyingly smart hive mind. Their only purpose is to consume. They arrive at a planet, devour every bit of biological material, and move on, leaving nothing but a dead rock. In our timeline, the Tyranids first showed up in the 41st millennium. Their arrival is believed to have been triggered by a massive psychic pulse from our galaxy. Maybe the overload of the Pharaoh's device during the Horus heresy, or the bright light of the Astronomican. Hive Fleet Behemoth was only stopped at the Ultramarines' homeworld of Macreg, at incredible cost. Later fleets would require the combined might of the Imperium and other races just to slow them down. In the timeline of Doom, the Astronomican isn't there to draw them in, but that doesn't matter. The galaxy is anything but quiet. The psychic roar of the Ork Empire, the swirling madness of thousands of chaos worlds, the silent hunger of the Rangdan territories. It's all psychic noise. It's the scent of a wounded, divided galaxy. It's the scent of a feast. When the hive fleets arrive in this timeline, they don't find a unified Imperium ready to fight back. They find a galaxy that's already broken. The Tyranids land on an Ork world and are met with brute force. The battle is titanic, but the Tyranids adapt. They absorb Ork biomass, and soon, new Tyranid creatures appear. Bigger, tougher, more ferocious. The Ork Empire, for all its power, is a monoculture of violence. The Tyranids are the embodiment of adaptation. The Orks are consumed. The hive fleets then drift into a chaos sector. The hive mind projects an immense psychic shadow, a blanket of silence that snuffs out demonic manifestations and cuts the cultists off from their dark gods. The followers of chaos, for all their unholy power, are just more biomass. They are consumed. The Tyranids encounter the void-like territories of the Rangdan Sloth, the insidious, shadowy tactics of the Sloth are useless against a foe that has no society to infiltrate, no minds to poison, only a single, all-consuming hunger. The ancient maggot men, who fed on the death of the galaxy for millennia, are themselves eaten for the last pitiful remnants of humanity. Huddled in the dark, this is the final, cruel mercy. They've been hunted, enslaved, and corrupted for thousands of years. The arrival of the Tyranids isn't a new horror. It's simply the end. There is no last stand. There is no heroic sacrifice. There is only the quiet, efficient process of consumption. The last human worlds are stripped bare. The hive fleets move on, their hunger unsated, leaving behind a galaxy that is finally, utterly silent. The stars that once shone on human colonies, on Ork empires, on chaos kingdoms now shine. On nothing but dead rock. The long, agonizing death of the human species is finally over. The nightmare kept us alive. If this deep dive into humanity's darkest path caught your imagination, consider subscribing for more journeys into the what-ifs of this universe. Like the video if you found it compelling, and let me know your own thoughts in the comments. Which of these extinction events do you think would have been the most terrifying fate for mankind? Your engagement helps build this community and lets us keep charting these grim possibilities. Until next time, remember that even in the darkest of timelines, there are stories worth telling.